up in a family of musical theatre lovers, I've been deeply familiar with the plot of Cats for pretty much as long as I can remember. Growing up, we had VHS tapes of Les Miserables, Phantom of the Opera, Joseph and his amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat, and honestly most things that Andrew Lloyd Webber had a hand in creating. As such, I've been deeply familiar with the songs of Cats since long before the recent release of the movie adaptation. Now, you know how sometimes you grow up with songs from a young age and you don't really process the lyrics? Like, you know the songs word for word, but you never really make the mental connection about their implications? Well, that happened to me, sitting down to watch Jason Derulo and Judi Dench sing about picking which cat finally gets to be euthanized up on the big screen. Watching it all unfold in a new terrifying adaptation, I finally took note of a line sung in regard to Idris Elba's cat Macavity. He's broken every human law. He breaks the law of gravity. Now, I get what they were going for with this line. Macavity is not only morally evil, but possesses literal magical powers. It's meant to be the audience's justification as to why we don't want to see him granted the sweet embrace of death, and an explanation of how he might try to cheat his way into victory. It's a throwaway line, but one that I can't stop thinking about. Macavity hasn't just broken a few human laws. He has broken every human law. Every single one of them. That's a lot of very hyper-specific laws to break. Now, let's stop and process the image of naked, furry Idris Elba committing some of these crimes, because I think once we're done, you'll agree this kitten needs to be granted the death he so desires. Now, I want to put some limits on the laws that Idris Elba cat has broken, because human laws contradict each other depending on where in the world you are and when in history you are. We know for a fact that the musical Cats is set in London, which narrows down our search of laws considerably. In terms of when the musical is set, while we have no definitive date mentioned in the movie or the musical, I think it's a fair assumption that the musical is set no later than 1939, the year in which T.S. Eliot published Old Possum's Book of Practical Cats, the book of poetry on which the musical is loosely based. So, let's consider Cats as being set in 1939 London. This means we can discount a bunch of more modern laws from Macavity's illegal repertoire. He hasn't been downloading illegal movies from torrent sites because that would be ridiculous with his lack of opposable thumbs. Still, that does leave him with a lot of crimes to commit in his short feline lifetime. Let's start with the general basic categories of crime. Starting off fairly light, we have property crimes, which basically governs anything relating to personal possessions. Sexy, furry, crotchless Idris Elba has committed burglary, arson, theft of a motor vehicle, he's sprayed graffiti on homes, he's committed armed robbery for small goods, he's pickpocketed small goods, he's deliberately damaged people's homes and torn up valuable artworks, just as a handful of examples. Cat Idris Elba doesn't respect your right to feel safe in your home, or to keep the things you've worked hard to accumulate. Stepping up in severity, Macavity is also a white-collar criminal, a category of crime that basically covers any illegal acts done by rich, powerful people in suits. We're talking wide-scale tax evasion, corporate espionage, underpaying workers, ignoring health code violations, embezzling funds, insider trading, bribery, copyright infringement, money laundering, identity theft, forgery. Now, for the white-collar crime, I'm not surprised by the fact that Macavity pulled those crimes off and that he did them. I'm more impressed that a literal cat managed to get high enough in the corporate ladder in London to be in a position of power where he was able to commit these crimes. Say what you will about Macavity, but he doesn't mess around in his quest for capitalist domination. Next up is consensual crime, which is a category of crime I honestly didn't know existed before researching Macavity's criminal record. Otherwise known as victimless crimes, these are basically the crimes that a person can consent to committing, and could occur with no one being harmed and no one being unhappy about them occurring, but are still illegal, and, it doesn't matter that you haven't hurt anyone, you are still breaking the law. Examples of consensual crimes include taking illegal drugs, engaging in sex work, or drinking alcohol while underage. Now, putting aside whether I think these things should be crimes in the first place, we can pretty easily research what laws were in place for these sort of acts in London in 1939 to get a sense of what Macavity was up to. In the UK, cocaine was made illegal in 1912, at least in theory, even if it wasn't strictly enforced. Sex work hadn't been truly criminalised yet in the UK in 1939, with the only stipulation being that you needed a licence before becoming a sex worker to help limit the spread of STDs. So we know that Macavity must have skipped that registration process and still gone into sex work. This was also around the time that opium became illegal in the UK, so you can add that to the list of illegal substances this cat was consuming. I give these three examples because I'm pretty sure the 2019 movie version of Cats is what you get if you combine cocaine, opium, and paying to see a lot of sexual gyration. Macavity also drank alcohol while underage, gambled while underage, and basically did anything that had an age limit on it while he was too young to do so, which makes sense because cats rarely live to the ripe old age of 18, so if he's gonna get those things done, he's gotta do it while he's underage, I suppose. And last up, let's talk about the most notable category of crime Macavity has been involved in. I feel bad for doing a pun there, because it's about to get a bit dark. We're talking about violent crime. And violent crime doesn't just mean crimes where you physically attack someone, but also crimes of indecency and threats of violence. This is probably the category of crime where Macavity racks up the worst list of offences. He's committed murder, assault, vehicular manslaughter, indecent exposure, sexual harassment, bigoted hate crimes, sexual assault, kidnapping, bank robbery, terrorism, torture, and a whole bunch of other unspeakable acts. But that's not even the end of our list of crimes yet. Considering Cats is set in 1939 London, we actually have another category of crimes introduced that year to consider. War crimes. Yes, World War II was starting to get underway in 1939, and UK Parliament passed several laws that year specifically aimed at the fact we were a nation at war. Looking through a list of laws and amendments during that year, Macavity must have broken the Official Secrets Act by transmitting sensitive British war data to our international enemies, aiding the opposing side of World War II with war secrets. He also engaged in trade with Nazi Germany, refused to pay back UK citizens whose land was claimed during the war, and fed misleading information to the UK that hampered the war effort. I think this does a pretty good job of setting the tone of Macavity's crimes. We all need to be a little less concerned that he's trying to cheat his way in a tournament to win euthanasia, and more concerned with the fact that he's a murderous child kidnapping rapist who helped the Nazis during World War II. Macavity should have been offered death, because the longer he is alive, the more evil he's inflicting on the world. I don't even know where he found the time in his short cat lifespan to do all of these crimes. I guess it's amazing what you can achieve when you have literal magic on your side.
So first your memory I'll jog and say a cat is not a dog.
If you've enjoyed this video and would like to support the creation of more work like this, please consider supporting me with $1 or more a month on Patreon at patreon.com/Laura K. Buzz.